What secrets can linger for 8 long years inside a locked, forgotten restroom deep in the Colorado mountains? On May 30th, 2020, deep in the mountains of Colorado, the answer to that question surfaced in the most unexpected way. The day began innocently enough. A small group of volunteers gathered at South Colony Lakes, their goal simple: reclaim an abandoned recreation area near an old, weathered parking lot. They moved methodically, hauling away trash, tearing out stubborn bushes, and forcing open forgotten buildings whose doors sagged on rusted hinges. One man drifted away from the group and stopped before a low, square concrete structure. A toilet cubicle sealed behind rough planks. Its wooden barricade was gray with age, the nails corroded to the color of dried blood. Nobody could recall the last time anyone had used it. With the steady persistence of someone determined to see what lay inside, he pried free the planks, each one giving way with a groan. The door's hinges protested, then finally yielded. The moment the gap opened, a stagnant wave of air rolled out, heavy, musty, and almost sweet with rot. Dust motes drifted in the dim light. In the far corner, he saw it, a backpack, its fabric faded and stiff under a crust of dust. Beside it lay a woman's crumpled jacket, a folded trail map, a flashlight dulled with grime, and a sealed plastic bag containing papers. Every surface was blanketed in a thick layer of dust and spider webs, as if time had been arrested inside this small, cold space. The name on the documents was unmistakable: Samantha Jones. A name that had haunted the people of Custer County since the summer of 2012. 8 years earlier, 27-year-old Samantha had driven her aging SUV to the base of the South Colony Lakes Trail. Security cameras at the entrance recorded her pulling in, stepping out with her pack, and starting down the trailhead alone. She was last seen that day in the parking lot below, where the climb begins. 3 days later, she still hadn't returned. Her car remained parked in the same spot, untouched. Her phone was off. On the 4th day, the official search began. Rescuers, volunteers, and dog handlers spread out through the high country. Drones buzzed above tree lines. Thermal imaging scanned the valleys. They traced the trails, combed the lake shores, and searched the steep slopes. But there was nothing. No scraps of clothing, no stray gear, no footprints. After a week, the search was called off. The explanation was the same one so often given in mountain disappearances. She must have fallen into a ravine or slipped from a rock wall, her body carried off by the current, or buried in the shifting debris of a rock slide. Her family begged the authorities to keep looking, but with no leads and exhausted resources, the case slipped into silence. It remained open in name only. Now, in 2020, that silence was broken. The police arrived quickly, sealing off the cubicle. Each item inside, the backpack, jacket, map, flashlight, and documents, was carefully collected, placed into individual containers. At first glance, it appeared nothing had been disturbed since the day she vanished. Inside the backpack was dry food, a first aid kit, spare batteries, and a notebook. That same day, forensic teams expanded the search outward from the cubicle. Roughly 200 yards away, tangled in a thicket of fallen trees, they found human bones: a skull, ribs, sections of pelvis, and long bones scattered among leaves and broken branches. By their weathered condition, they had been lying there for years. DNA testing confirmed they belonged to Samantha Jones. The fractures in her pelvis and the severe damage to her skull pointed toward a fall from height. No marks of violence were found. No knife cuts, no bullet holes, nothing suggesting an animal attack. From this, investigators built their theory. Somewhere on the slope, Samantha may have slipped, injuring her leg. In pain, she managed to make her way, or crawl, to the recreation area, finding shelter in the cubicle. Later, possibly trying to reach help, she left her gear behind and set out again, only to fall into the ravine where her remains were eventually found. The theory tied events together neatly, too neatly. Why would she leave her backpack, food, and flashlight behind? Why, in all the years of searching, had no one opened a restroom door so close to the trail? Could someone have crossed her path before she reached shelter? Someone whose presence would never appear in the official record? Back in 2012, investigators had pursued 3 possible explanations. The first was the most obvious: an accident in the mountains. The South Colony Lakes area may draw tourists, but it is unforgiving. Its trails twist around sudden altitude drops, scree fields, and cliffs hidden by dense vegetation. In summer, the weather can flip in hours, sunlit morning trails turning to fog and storm by noon. Rescuers often warn that inexperienced hikers underestimate the risks. Officers interviewed everyone known to be in the area that day. Around midday, 2 tourists met Samantha on her way up. She was moving quickly, no signs of fatigue, headphones in, a map tucked into the side pocket of her pack. Later, as evening approached, 2 more hikers saw her at a lookout point, sitting calmly on a rock, writing in a notebook. That was the last confirmed sighting. Her SUV was found exactly as she had left it, locked, a water bottle, and empty candy wrapper inside. The second theory involved criminal activity. Although no clear evidence pointed to foul play, investigators checked every tourist, fisherman, and park employee present in those days. A few were questioned again when alibis didn't align perfectly, but nothing solid emerged. Then came an intriguing but unverified lead. A man claimed that the day before Samantha vanished, he had seen a woman, resembling her on a lower trail in the company of a tall, thin, bearded man in a dark jacket. No one else reported such a sighting. The parking lot cameras had captured only Samantha. No man in dark clothing ever appeared. The lead was ultimately set aside as unreliable. The third possibility considered was deliberate disappearance. Detectives dug into Samantha's personal life, her finances, friendships, travel history. She lived alone in a small Colorado Springs apartment, worked in a tourist shop, carried no debts, and was described by family as calm, with no conflicts or signs of distress. Her social media held no clues, no cryptic posts or farewell messages. One factor loomed large: the weather. In the evening she was last seen, a sudden heavy rain hit the mountains, temperatures dropping near freezing above 6,500 feet. For a hiker wet and possibly injured, the cold would have been punishing. The original search was extensive. Helicopters flew daily until clouds forced them back. Dog teams picked up faint scent trails on a slope, but each one ended abruptly in the forest. No scraps of fabric, no fragments of gear, nothing. There was one final oddity. Several faint footprints were found that matched Samantha's shoe size, but they didn't follow the main trail back toward safety. Instead, they veered into dense forest, toward isolation. The faint footprints ended where the forest swallowed the trail. Beyond that point, the path dissolved into undergrowth, and with it, any certainty of where Samantha Jones had gone. Rescuers pushed into the thickets, marking trees, probing the ground for clues, but the search turned up nothing. By the end of the first month, the active operation was shut down. Her family refused to let it end there. They tried to hire private investigators, but the mountains around South Colony Lakes were vast, unforgiving. Without new leads, every expedition dissolved into wasted hours and empty maps. The police left the file open, but rarely touched it, until May of 2020, when a locked cabin yielded the first tangible evidence in 8 years. When Samantha's backpack emerged from that sealed cubicle, old theories resurfaced. If she had indeed made it to the recreation area, that could explain why her belongings were found intact. But a sharper question lingered in the air. Why leave them behind? And perhaps even more troubling, who boarded up that door after she vanished? In 2020, the cubicle was treated as a crime scene. Volunteers had already removed the planks when police arrived, but the officers moved fast, cordoning off the entire parking area. Inside, the air was dry and stale, layered with dust and cobwebs. There were no signs of animals, no rot, only a muted mustiness that suggested nothing living had been inside for years. The backpack sat neatly in the corner. Nearby, a crumpled women's jacket rested on the floor. On a wall hook hung a sealed plastic bag containing Samantha's passport, driver's license, and bank cards, all pristine. In the side pocket of the pack, investigators found a marked map of the South Colony Lakes area, a flashlight with dead batteries that still worked, and a small pouch of dry rations. The first aid kit was intact, its bandages yellowed, painkillers expired just a couple of years after she disappeared. Beneath the backpack, a broken metal carabiner lay on the floor, a standard hiker's model. Forensic specialists could not determine whether it had snapped before or after Samantha left her gear. The door's interior bolt was functional and unaltered. From the inside, the cabin could be secured. From the outside, it would require additional planks, just like the ones found nailed across it. This was the point that split opinion in the community. The boards could have been added at any time after she was gone. Locals said several old cubicles had been sealed in the mid-2000s to keep tourists out, but no one could confirm this particular cabin's history. Roughly 200 yards away, through dense undergrowth and beneath fallen trees, they found the bones. A skull, pieces of pelvis, fragments of limbs bleached by seasons of sun and snow. There were no scraps of clothing, no shoes. The scene told its own bleak story. Exposure to wind, rain, and animals had stripped the remains clean. Forensic analysis revealed two devastating injuries: a massive fracture to the frontal temporal region of the skull and a broken pelvis. Both could have come from a fall onto rock from a height of 6 to 10 feet. There were no signs of weapons, no evidence of stabbing or gunfire. Investigators drafted their version of events. Samantha had injured her leg or pelvis in a fall, but somehow reached the recreation area, using the cubicle as shelter. At some point, she left her gear behind, perhaps to move faster, and headed toward the trail in search of help. On the way, she fell again, this time fatally. But this explanation rang hollow for many. Why abandon food, medical supplies, a flashlight, and your documents? All lifelines in the mountains? And why was her body found off to the side in a windbreak, rather than along the most logical route to the trail? The police scoured the surroundings for more. They found only a rusty tin can and a length of rope, both unrelated. During interviews, a few locals recalled a vagrant who had been camping near the parking lot around the time of her disappearance. He was described as in his 50s, with a thick beard, carrying an old backpack, often asking hikers for food, sometimes sleeping in abandoned buildings. Police tried to track him down, but he vanished as completely as Samantha had. His name was never learned, and no direct link was ever proven. Despite lingering doubts, the official conclusion was unchanged: accidental death. Still, those who had combed the ridges in 2012 felt the story wasn't so simple. In reviewing the case, investigators returned to the original search maps. They discovered the location where her remains were found had been checked before, but only from the edge. In 2012, the spot was choked with wind-fallen trees, dense enough that rescuers merely scanned it visually. It wasn't until years later, when heavy snow snapped the trees and flattened the growth, that the bones became visible. The injuries matched a short fall onto stone. The absence of clothing and footwear, forensic experts claimed, could be explained by 8 years of exposure, fabric and leather decaying or being scattered by wildlife. But some searchers doubted that explanation, noting that even in harsh conditions, small fabric fragments often survive longer. The placement of the backpack raised even more eyebrows. It stood upright in the corner, as if set there deliberately. Everything inside, the rations, first aid kit, and flashlight, could have meant the difference between survival and death. Why would she leave them? The official answer was pragmatic. She may have decided to travel light, hoping to reach help more quickly. And then there was the boarded door. No record existed of who nailed it shut or when. Park staff confirmed that many abandoned structures had been secured years earlier, but none could verify this particular cubicle's timeline. If the planks had been added after Samantha left, then her possessions had sat undisturbed inside for 8 years, while she died somewhere nearby, just out of sight. There was also the matter of the map, tucked neatly into the side pocket of Samantha's backpack. It wasn't just a trail guide, it bore 2 routes marked in bold strokes of marker ink. One line traced the main ascent to South Colony Lakes. The other veered away, skirting into the woods toward a forgotten forester's hut, a mile from the recreation area. In 2012, that hut was nothing more than a ruin, long abandoned, its timbers collapsing into the earth. Investigators never found evidence that Samantha had gone there, but the possibility lingered. Had she been heading toward it when things went wrong? Or was it simply a place she had marked as a point of interest before her trip? Then came the voices from the past, statements overlooked or dismissed during the original search. Several locals reported hearing a woman scream somewhere along the trail on the night she vanished. One tourist swore he saw a light flashing far below, near a ravine. At the time, search coordinators chalked it up to chance, campers perhaps, or firelight, reflecting in a way that mimicked a distress signal. But in hindsight, those details feel heavier, harder to ignore. When investigators in 2020 combed through the original search records, they reviewed every photo and video taken during those frantic early days. In one grainy frame from a drone sweep, a dark shape appeared at the tree line, close to the very spot where her bones would be found 8 years later. Back then, it was dismissed as a shadow. Now, experts quietly admit it might have been something more, a piece of clothing, or perhaps Samantha herself. The image, however, was too blurred to be conclusive. By the time every scrap of evidence had been revisited, the police settled on their final conclusion. Samantha's death was ruled an accident. The official narrative painted a simple, if tragic, sequence. She fell and suffered severe injuries, reached the recreation area, left her belongings in the cubicle, and tried to make her way back to the trail, only to collapse and fall into a ravine. For her family, that verdict was a strange mixture of relief and pain. Relief because she had finally been found and could be laid to rest. Pain because the answers they received only led to deeper questions. Why would an experienced hiker leave behind food, medical supplies, and light? Why had her possessions been sealed away in a boarded-up cabin for 8 years? And perhaps the most haunting question of all, was someone out there with her in those final hours? The case was closed. The remains were returned to her relatives, her belongings placed gently back into her family's hands. Yet, in the shadow of the South Colony Lakes, the story refuses to die. Locals still speak of that boarded concrete cubicle and the backpack waiting inside, untouched by time. Hikers pass the old recreation area and find themselves glancing at the tree line, reminded that in these mountains, no matter how many people walk the trails, one wrong turn can erase a person completely.